Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say once again joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Germany. Good morning, Richard.
And good afternoon, Jeffrey.
It is actually a great afternoon. We're getting tons of rain, which we desperately need, so it's a good afternoon for ducks. So today we're going to deliver proof about Wspr's impact on MH370 and the data surrounding MH370. There are many kinds of data: aircraft data, engine data, fuel data, communication data, debris data, and drift data. This information comes from ATC, radios, radars, ADS-B receivers, and satellites. Richard, you've been analysing 370 for 11 years, and you are on record as saying the crash location is within a radius of 30 kilometres at 29.128 south, 99.934 east. How can you be so sure? Walk us through what we know from the data that we have.
That's a very good question, Jeffrey, and a lot of people have asked the same question. How can we be sure? And it sounds very precise, giving a location to three decimal places. Initially, all we knew about MH370 on the 7th of March was very little, the 7th of March 2014. The aircraft departed Kuala Lumpur at 16:42 UTC, which was 42 minutes past midnight local time, and bound for Beijing. We're showing a screenshot with the initial data, which is taken from the terminal area radar and the regional area radar and ADS-B data. And in green, we're showing the flight plan. So you see the aircraft followed quite closely the flight plan. That is up until a certain point in time. So just before takeoff, ATC radioed Malaysian 370. It's cleared to Beijing via waypoint Pybos, Alpha departure 6,000 feet, Squawk 2157. And this code, transponder code 2157, was picked up by the regional area radar that sits on top of a hill at a height of almost 6,000 feet above sea level in the central Malaysia and has a very good view of the whole area. And it was also picked up by the Kuala Lumpur terminal area radar. And you can see it picked it up when it was just lifted off from runway 32 right at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport. And there's an ADS-B receiver at Terengganu Airport on the other coast of Malaysia towards the east. And that picked up flight code 2157 and the ICAO aircraft identifier 75008F at 1649. So we have 3,584 data points. But that only lasted for 30 minutes and 55 seconds, and then nothing.
So, what do you mean by nothing?
Well, I mean, no ATC radar, no transponder, no radio, no Satcom, nothing identifying MH370 or using the ICAO code or the transponder code, nothing showing the whereabouts of MH370. We do have, and that's a screenshot we're showing now, some radar data from Kota Baru Airport and later from Penang Airport, which has a area radar shared with the Butterworth Air Force Base. And that radar serves both the airports, and that gives us a track back across Malaysia towards the Penang Airport and towards the Malacca Strait.
So were these unidentified aircraft both MH370 with its transponder switched off?
Yes, it turns out that the unidentified aircraft were all MH370. They had to connect the dots to find that out. And an hour after the diversion, the Satcom system on board MH370 was switched back on. And we're showing a screenshot with the Inmarsat satellite data. And then the flight routes and waypoints in the area. And we started thinking, where was MH370 heading? Which waypoints was it heading for? Or which flight routes was it following? So the Inmarsat satellite data doesn't actually tell us exactly where the aircraft is, but it tells us an arc, and it's somewhere on that arc at 7 different points in time.
So where was MH370 heading?
That's the big question. And there are plenty of ideas, but nothing confirmed. Searches were conducted involving thousands of people, hundreds of aircraft, tens of ships, and years went by, and $300 million US was spent. In 2017, the official search was suspended, but following this, a private search was undertaken by Ocean Infinity in 2018, which unfortunately also concluded after 6 months without success. And jumping forward to 2021, a guy called Dr. Robert Westphal first proposed the idea of using the weak signal propagation reporter, Wspr, to detect and track Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. And he first came up with the idea in July 2020, but then he published in 2021 a paper entitled or titled Geocaching in the Ionosphere. And he presented that at the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation Conference, HAM-SCI, in March of 2021. So we're showing another screenshot with the Inmarsat BTO and BFO data and the Wspr intersections of anomalous signals. And I started investigating this idea and started tracking Wspr anomalies. At first, just the signal level anomalies, and then later the frequency anomalies. And then mapping those intersections of multiple anomalous signals against the track of MH370. And lo and behold, it aligned with the Inmarsat satellite BTO and BFO data, which comes from a completely different source.
Hmm. So was this your eureka moment then?
I was certainly very encouraged by those results. Continued to track MH370 all the way to the end of its flight. I think the eureka moment came when the track from Wspr not only tied up with the Inmarsat satellite data at each arc, but also with the Boeing fuel range and endurance data. the Boeing performance data, and a weather model of the Indian Ocean, both the surface but also at various cruising altitudes. And then with the floating debris drift analysis from experts like Professor Charita Patiarachi at the University of Western Australia. And we're showing another screenshot with the Inmarsat arcs and the flight path from Wspr. And I was then joined in my investigation by Dr. Hannes Kurtzi from South Africa, who had a PhD in radio engineering, and then by Professor Simon Maskell from Liverpool University, who's started a large-scale study on Wspr, and the at the same time, obviously, the critics started attacking our work as well, saying things like, "How can you possibly distinguish MH370 from all the other thousands of aircraft in the air at any particular point in time?" And at some point, we're going to devote a full episode to these critics of the Wspr theory.
Were you talking of them? Were you discouraged by the criticism and the attacks and the detractors? I know they were pretty savage.
Yeah. The rational and decent critics who wrote papers and articles uh, showing their concerns, people like Victor Unello, they didn't bother me, and on the contrary, I found it actually helpful to do research to try and answer the questions they raise. But there were others, and I received death threats even, and the police have investigated, unfortunately, not successfully identifying any culprits. And that was pretty nasty and difficult to handle. So, for the rational criticism, we tried to react positively. What we did was we built an antenna database of the actual location of all Wspr transmitters and receivers. And we also built a database from the ADS-B data of all aircraft in the air in any one 24-hour period. The first day we picked for the investigation was my birthday, the 1st of August 2023. There were 73,540 aircraft in the air during that 24-hour period, and with up to over 100,000 data points each, and each data point has 8 data items: time, latitude, longitude, altitude, rate of climb, ground speed, track, and certain software flags. That's around 142 gigabytes per day.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This is the work that Professor Simon Maskell's working on at the moment, is it not?
Yeah, he's doing that for several days, and so at
Mm.
142 gigabytes a day, he collects a lot of data. Um,
Well, that I was going to say that is a lot of data.
yeah, and you add to that 1.5 gigabytes a day of Whisper data, and then you try to match the 1.5 gigabyte per day of Whisper data with the 142 gigabyte per day of aircraft data. So it's a massive task. It is very slow on my laptop to handle that sort of task. But fortunately, Professor Simon Maskell has a huge computer network and can handle so-called big data. We're showing another screenshot of the Whisper anomalies and all the other aircraft around MH370. There were quite a number when it first took off, but later into the flight in the Indian Ocean, there were relatively few other aircraft crossing the Indian Ocean. And when you start looking for anomalous intersecting whisper links and working out which ones belong to which aircraft, we do an exercise of what we call working out the true positives and the false positives.
Now I'm positive that I don't understand that. So what is a true positive and what's a false positive?
Yeah, it's statistical jargon. They actually use it in the pharmaceutical industry, for example, and you take a pill, and if you get better, then you're a true positive. And if you take a placebo rather than the pill in a trial, and you say you get better, they know, there's something up. So a true positive for us is when the whisper data says there is an anomaly at a particular location and a particular point in time when an aircraft is also truly there at that location and time. And a false positive is when the whisper data says there's an anomaly, but we know for sure there was no aircraft. And we build this statistical model called a receiver operating characteristic curve from the results, and it plots the true positives against the false positives. So we're showing a screenshot of a sample ROC curve. The red dashed line going diagonally across this graphic is a 50-50 chance of getting it right. So if the results followed the red dashed line, then it would be like flipping a coin. The blue line are the actual results in this particular test of over 1,000 observations. And the vertical lines are the 95% confidence intervals. So they tell us how sure we are of each particular result along blue line. And the idea is to get the vertical lines or bars to not cross the red dashed line, but they do, as you can see, in some cases. So that means Whisper does tell us something, but it also tells us it's a noisy sensor. So we do not recommend Whisper as a reliable real-time radar, for example. But in a situation like MH370, where there is no radar data available in the middle of the Indian Ocean, or for a historic analysis going back to March 2014, where there is insufficient satellite or oceanographic data to pinpoint a crash location, then Whisper can be very useful.
Very useful indeed. So what is the outcome of all this data processing and analysis, Richard?
Well, the bottom line is we're able to show the entire flight path, and we're doing that on the screen now, all the way to a crash location. And as I said earlier, it matched the initial radar and ADS-B data, but it matches then the Inmarsat satellite data, the Boeing fuel range, the UWA oceanographic model and drift analysis. So, we start building confidence in the results.
Now, you've done a presentation just over the weekend to the Amateur Radio Club in Canada. Can you tell us more about how that went?
Yeah. Well, they were asking the same questions. How does Whisper find MH370? And they had a number of questions. The Amateur Radio Club is called the Island HF Radio Association, based on Vancouver Island in Canada. Have nearly 100 members spread up and down the island, as well as on the mainland of Canada and elsewhere. And they do high frequency radio stuff. So HF is high frequency. They like operating radios. They talk to people around the world. They run competitions. They actually build their own radios in some cases. So, they're quite expert and they find their hobby infinitely interesting. So they asked me to give a presentation on Whisper and how that helped MH370. They had a number of questions which we handled interactively, and there is a link in below to that video. It runs for an hour or just over. Um, and some people wanted a 1 hour presentation, so here we go. Um, and I've also included a link to the slides that I gave in that presentation
Mm.
and the script I used for that presentation. And you see that I don't actually follow the script exactly, but sort of.
Well, that's certainly a very comprehensive rundown on Whisper, how it works, a demo. But I'm sure we're going to get plenty of questions. But one question, look, I'd like to segue back a bit if we could, Richard. The
Yeah.
Satcom. Why did whoever turn the Satcom off, and then why did they turn it back on?
Yeah, that's a very a good question. It has to do with the ACARS reporting.
Mm.
Um, and the ACARS reporting is every 15 minutes, the aircraft will transmit either via satellite or by VHF radio a position report. And if you had that information, then you would at least know every 15 minutes where MH370 was. So the Satcom and the ACARS got switched off. Uh, and then when the ACARS was switched off from both VHF radio and from Satcom, you could switch the Satcom back on. Basically, you could switch the transponder back on because that would give you a indication if there was any other traffic in the area. So when you were out of range of radar, uh, an hour later, you could safely switch the transponder back on for a brief moment, check if there are any other aircraft around, and then switch your transponder back off. So it's a complicated connection of I don't want to be found, but I want to know what else is going on around me, and a different difficult balancing act between knowing what's going on but not being found out yourself.
But it was that Satcom that Inmarsat was tracking.
Yeah, and what was obviously not known is that the Satcom automatically sent a signal every hour to say to the aircraft system, "Are you still there?" And the aircraft system responds, "Yes, I am." And those signals every hour give us the arcs, which gave us a lot of clues as to the path taken by the aircraft.
And then when the fuel runs out and the system's power down before I think the APU kicks in, the Satcom goes down, but then comes back up again.
Yep, and that's an automatic process. So the
And that's,
SATCOM uh,
yep,
uh, satellite data unit reboots when the APU kicks in, and that told us the seventh arc. So
that's,
we know exactly the point of fuel exhaustion.
mm. Yeah, thank you. I wasn't sure whether the viewers understood the significance of the Satcom turning off and turning on again. But look, that's fascinating, Richard. Absolutely, really just extraordinary. Now, I also understand from our various conversations that you've built various software programs to process this Whisper data, have you not?
Yeah, they're designed to run on a laptop, so I'm not competing with Liverpool University's big data system. Um, but I have invited people to download that software. I've had a number of people take me up on that, and you need to have a MATLAB license in order to be able to run the software. But there are over 100 people now who are running the software that I've developed for themselves and
Mm.
checking out Whisper. And that's a great thing.
Okay, well, tomorrow, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to take questions on this, are we not?
Yep, I guess there might be some questions, and we
I
still
think
got questions coming in on other
I
episodes.
know.
So
It's
I'm happy to take whatever questions you want, Jeffrey.
lovely. All right, and then we're going to move on towards the end of the week and look at the FBI flight simulator scenario.
Yeah, well, the FBI were quite involved in supporting the investigation and checking out the flight simulator and the deleted files on that. They did some forensics, and they also checked out the passenger list and did quite a bit of work on that. And we know there were a couple of guys with stolen passports, for example.
Mm,
So we'll talk all about that later in the week.
fantastic. Well, thank you very much indeed for all this work, Richard. I'm sure it will certainly help clarify Whisper to a lot of viewers. And of course, we are going to give the critics a special episode too to go through their concerns and answer those as well. Are we not?
Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
it'd be great. So, viewers, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. Please keep the comments coming. We love them, and also your support is wonderful. We really do appreciate it. And do tune in tomorrow. And Richard, thank you very much.
You're welcome.